Hello, and welcome to another Tokidoki customization video. Today we will be using this timber unicorno. As you can see, his feathers are missing and he's in desperate need of a makeover. Firstly, I sketch up an idea of what I want to make. Since it's the spooky season, I was inspired by dark nature themes. I wanted to include elements of a skull, moth, plants, and night sky. I know you're thinking, isn't that a bit much going on? Maybe. So I've added a bit of negative black space to give our eyes some rest and make the design more balanced. Now that we have an idea, the next step is to remove the factory paint. Honestly, this might be my favorite part of the whole process. My 100% acetone gets it right off. I do the initial wipe with my tissue, getting the bulk of the paint off. I wonder why they chose to color the mane like this underneath. Once most of the paint is off, I can go in with a Q-tip to get the crevices. You can also use a cheap brush dipped in acetone if you find an area that is really wedged. Now that most of the paint is off, I can build the mini armature for the antler add-ons. I use a flexible wire and loop it to the base so it won't be able to slide out of the epoxy once it's hardened. I take my time lining up the wires and bending them, making sure to look at my sketch as well as pictures of real antlers. I use masking tape to temporarily hold the wire on to position them and add a thinner floral wire for the spikes. Time for the sculpting. I'll be using Aves 2-part epoxy sculpt. I use gloves to mix as directed. Very carefully, I use my silicone tools to place little bits of epoxy onto the wire, and then smooth them to the shape I want. I make sure to dip my tools into water to avoid them sticking. Once that's done, I set them aside so I can take care of the hole the feathers left behind. I take a fine grit sandpaper and get the rough edges off. Using a tiny piece of epoxy, I fill in the hole and smooth it over. Now I can set the antlers permanently. I stick a small bit of epoxy under the wire and push them into place, covering with the tape again. I give them one last touch up with some final details. The little leaf on the back leg is the next detail to sculpt. I make tiny noodles and wrap them around. I then noticed the tail didn't want to sit right for some reason. After a lot of struggling, I managed to eventually get it held down permanently with little epoxy pieces. On to more details. First up is the itty bitty mushrooms. To get the moth wings, I have to add another layer for the wing. I make sure to look at pictures of real atlas moths to get the shape right. I had some extra epoxy left over, you know, the struggle, so I tried to cut out some leaves to harden and stick on later. I learned my lesson though is it's much easier to just stick on the whole thing when it's still soft. Once I'm done fiddling with the extra epoxy, I let it all harden overnight. Taking a fine sandpaper, I sharpen the points of the antlers. Make sure you wear proper respiratory protection when sanding this stuff. Next, I want to sculpt the skull, so I take a different Unicorno for reference and mark where I want the eyes to go with a pen. they are lined up the way I want, I mix my epoxy and apply it to the figure in thin layers. I shape it as I go, giving it the skull appearance. I use a sharp blade to cut away some of the excess and help shape finer areas. I then go in with some water to help smooth everything out. I continue sculpting the rest of the details, like a wilder mane and the plants. After everything's hardened, I give it a spray with my Rustoleum white primer. This isn't my favorite primer, I'm just trying to use it up really. Make sure to do this in a well-ventilated area. It doesn't get much more ventilated than outside. Even still, I make sure to wear my respirator. Try and do this when it's not too hot and humid outside, or it can get texture and be sticky forever. Apply it in thin, even coats. After this part dried, I sprayed the bottom, belly, and hooves. If you run into issues, you can always sand it down with a fine sandpaper and cover it up with acrylic gesso. I sanded a little before moving on to the paint. I'm using 2 different student-grade acrylic paints, Liquitex and Master's Touch. Remember to always try and start with the lightest colors first. You may want to thin the paint more with water so you don't have so many brush strokes. I forgot to do that for this one. It's not so much of an issue since it's quite a natural design, but it's important to remember if you're going for something with a cleaner look. Now it's time to paint the Moth Wings. Making sure to look at my references again, I mix up brownish-orange shades. The first coat was a little too orange, so I darkened it up in the next layer. For the leaves, we want a nice lush green. Right now it's looking more like a Shrek Unicorno, so let's add a layer of darker green. Now I can add the little leaves. I'm using a few different types for reference to give it variety. Some color for the teeny mushrooms. Time for the Starry Sky Mane. I mixed together black, white, and blue for this deep navy color. While the paint is still wet, I sprinkle on some blue and silver glitter to give it a starry shine. The glitter won't stick on permanently till I give it a final spray, so I have to be careful. I use a dry brush to brush away the extra glitter. Next, I add the little moon design on the chest. Now I can add the black to the legs and underside. time for some eyes. Luckily, I can follow the sockets I already made with the skull. I still check them though to make sure they're even as I paint them. Don't forget the cute little lashes. I mix up an orangey red to complete the eyes with a spooky pupil. After waiting a few days for the paint to fully dry, it's time for the finishing spray. I use Rustoleum gloss for my first coat, making sure to keep it thin by not spraying too closely. After that's fully dried, I add the matte spray over top for a satin finish like the real Tokidokis. Now you might notice this negates the effect of the glitter. Not to worry though, I take my Liquitex gloss varnish and go over the mane once its spray is fully dry. I had to wait for some in the mail, so it was definitely all dry by the time I got it. All done! Time to see the finished result. Let's see what the cat thinks. Ah, so rude! Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something in this video. Give that like button a boop and subscribe for more projects.